Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Matrix. So, I've been wanting to review this movie for a very long time. I've had this already prepared to review for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, a new trailer for a Matrix movie is to actually happen. I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is a good time to go and talk about The Matrix. Because I just, have been wanting to watch this movie regardless for a long time. This and, Point Break was one of those where I've kind of been wanting to cover for a long time, but, I really just have been waiting just to kind of, bide my time because I thought I was like, oh, I'll do this instead, or oh, I'll cover this, or oh, whatever. And so, going into The Matrix, finally watching this movie after a cluster of time, man, does this movie still hold up. This movie, I think the sequels kind of do get goofy. There is that whole, Reloaded thing where, it's to be continued in the sequel. I don't think I've ever really fully fledgedly seen the entire Revolution movie, or the third film, whatever the third film is. I don't think I've ever actually sat down and 100% watched that movie. I think I've kind of half in, half out watched it. Just because it's man, this movie is kind of getting too goofy, and I think we're, forgetting why we came to this whole thing. So, going into this movie, some insights about it. Well, supposedly there was to be two people that were actually supposed to be in this film and worked. We can confirm that Will Smith was actually supposed to be the Neo character. Could anybody buy why Will Smith as a computer hacker? Maybe. Supposedly Will Smith had went onto his YouTube channel and had done a whole entire video mentioning how he was going to supposedly be Neo in The Matrix. But he decided that he wanted to turn that down because the movie to him sounded way too goofy. And so he went off and did a movie called Wild Wild West because that seemed less goofy than The Matrix. Maybe he just wanted to do a Western. Maybe he, I don't know. Bad, poor decision on Will Smith's case, but when looking at it, that really did severely help out Keanu Reeves by being a part of this film. Morbius originally was going to be Sean Connery. Would you like the red pill, or would you like the blue pill? It doesn't matter, because both of them do the exact same thing. Suck it. That's the one thing that bothered me. You never see one person ever in the Matrix of things take the red pill. You know what I would have liked to have been told afterwards by Morbius? He's like, well, good choice because either one does the exact same thing. Sucks to be you. And then Neo would have had to have just forcibly done the same thing either way. Because both of them are the exact same pill. Anyways, going into this film still holds up. It's so good. Just such a good movie. You just love the action sequences. You just thoroughly enjoy, when Keanu has to open up his trench coat and all the guns are coming out. Freaking awesome. We have so much of this movie that really is to dip into so many other films that have kind of gone on and done the whole flying backwards maneuver, or there's been certain things that have tried to desperately look like Neo from The Matrix. If you go into Grandmother's Boy, there's to be this really genius guy who's to basically just dress up like Neo from The Matrix all the time. And I think in Deuce Bigalow, American Gigolo, there's the part where he does the flying back maneuver that Keanu Reeves is known for doing. There have been a lot of scary movies or parody films that also try to mimic the whole floating back maneuver goofingly. there have been just a numerous amount of things. Like we still have like Space Jam, a new legacy, trying to copy and paste from the Matrix because it's part of their catalog, because it's connected to Warner Brothers. So there's so much about this, so much about the Matrix that has been tied into pop culture rather than just being its own thing. I don't know how many times of how many things that we've had several people that have tried to mimic the Trinity leg kick, or the Keanu Reeves floating back thing, or the Morbius red pill, blue pill thing. And then we would also have the red, green, blue, blue situation. Man, you have to really go and really try to make it into that whole getting out of the Matrix scenario. There's like two pills you have to take, then you have to get this like color combination going, and then you have to play Twister afterwards. Shoot some ladders. Is that going to happen next? So, so for anybody who has never heard of the Matrix before, because if you haven't, it's been out since 1999. So, what is this movie about? Well, simply it's to really have gotten us to want to do virtual reality. I don't think Oculus Rifts and VR systems that we've probably heard of numerous times over, of us having a world to connect to in a virtual environment, would probably not have gotten created if it wasn't for the Matrix, because this is what that movie is really about. We end up finding out that the world around us is really all fake. It's not really true. It's a lie that we are to be fed. And so, really, what is to actually happen here is that we are to have people who are in the real world starting to pull others from that same not quite real world and telling them the truth, telling them that supposedly they have created AIs, and then AIs had decided to just go and fight against them, and which created this kind of desolate wasteland that is to be the real world, forcing them to having to go through sewers and underground spots to try and get away from these sentinels that are to be this kind of octopus-like character that is to try and come after people, while being in ships like the Nebuchadnezzar, or whichever freaking name that goofily is to be played out here. So, also there was one thing that I could also say, is supposedly Aaliyah was actually going to be in one of the Matrix films, but sadly enough she was to be passed away, to eventually get recasted as someone else. Man, was that kind of sad, because it's like, man, we could have had freaking Aaliyah in this franchise, but sadly enough, she passed away via a plane crash, I believe, from what I remember. So, going into this, so we pluck Keanu from the real world, and we are to assess or assume that anyone could eventually be this character called the One. Funny enough, we have a guy named Neo who could quite possibly be called the One, because if he switched some words around, or some letters around, I mean. Yeah, wouldn't it be obvious? One, Neo, to each their own. So, going into this movie, I thoroughly enjoy it. It's kind of interesting how supposedly we are to assume that the Matrix isn't a real world, but how is it that there hasn't been just a ton of mistakes that we would start to have Keanu just naturally assume that none of this is actually real? How we have these action sequences and everything like that would all of a sudden have us believe that none of this seems real. And it's also kind of interesting and very goofy where Neo himself, or Mr. Anderson, is to basically tell us, like, hey, like, have you ever, like, thought that you were asleep when you were awake? Like, I guess that's what this world has kind of come to. to eventually be a place where there is so many problems going on within this world where you can't really believe that this is a actually real place, a real environment that you can actually decide upon yourself. When are you awake, when are you asleep? So I've talked about this movie long enough, and so let's just go into this movie. Let's go into this film and just talk about how really we can just enjoy this film. Because, like, is there people that hate The Matrix? Probably, because it's probably just like, I don't understand this movie, or I just don't like this movie because it's just action sequences. It has to rely on a lot of action sequences. That has to do with a lot of goofy special effects and blah blah. Like, people might hate The Matrix. People might love The Matrix. People might just say that, like, Keanu Reeves, thumbs up, but everything else, I don't know. Anyways, let's go on our way to see that it's about that coveted time to go into spoilers. I barely teed this up, but it's freaking The Matrix. People can't avoid The Matrix. It's been everywhere. It's been inside of our lives for I don't know how long. And so anybody who hasn't probably possibly heard of The Matrix or has never seen the movie or seen parts of, you're missing out. This is a good movie, or especially the first film is a really good film. Anything that happens after that is just kind of, it gets kind of goofy. So let's go out of our way to say that it is that time again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we to spoil who this movie. So let's go into it. So, very beginning of the film is to have us get this phone call. Because everything about this movie is to deal with codes. Mountain Dew, Code Red, I hope so, probably not. Anyways, so the very first part of this is to have Trinity get a call from Cypher. And so I guess Trinity is to be gawking after this guy, I don't know his name, Neo? Keanu? Reed guy? That dude? The biggest part of this whole entire movie. So it seems that Trinity is stalking after Neo, just like a weird stalker girl, because maybe she is to believe that she's going to fall in love with Neo, probably. So, because this girl is being in there far too long to be gawking after Neo, all of a sudden we have Mr. Smith on the outside of the building calling up all these cops to go in there without his consent and trying to take Trinity down and arrest her. Agent Smith is to go to this police officer and say, hey, like, I just told you to set up a perimeter. I didn't tell you to go in. And the police officer is like, we can take care of a little girl. And the agent, like, turns back to this police officer. It's like, your men are already dead. So Trinity is to hang up from Cypher because she's busy with police officers right around her. So all of a sudden we get the most iconic move where Trinity is to eventually go disarm one of these police officers and jump up and freaking kick another one of them. And so she's taking all of these police officers down, going to the rooftop upon this thing and jumping from rooftop to rooftop. And so eventually this girl is to be flying through buildings and jumping off rooftops and whichever. And so she ends up crashing through one window to fall down this flight of stairs, which I'm like, yes! The best sequences in a movie is someone falling down a flight of stairs because it probably hurts like a mother, regardless of how, like padding someone has, or if it's just a dummy falling down a flight of stairs, it still freaking hurts. Believe me, even if it's a dummy, like, it freaking hurts falling down a flight of stairs. So Trinity is to have her guns hosted, and she's looking out the window, and she's like, get up, Trinity, get up. And then she gets up and maneuvers. So this agent is to be hopping from rooftop to rooftop, and all of a sudden we have a regional police officer who is to go and look at this guy, and he's like, that's unbelievable. but it happened. Agents can do wild stuff, weird stuff. So eventually Trinity is to make her way to this phone to eventually put her hand on the screen while holding onto the phone, so that way she can go back into the what is the supposedly real world and get unhooked. So the agent is to transform from where he was to now this like garbage truck to try and run this phone booth over, and he doesn't get to her in time and just crashes into this building. And they're like, well, it's too bad that we didn't get her, but we know who they're going for next. So that lands us to see Neo, who's sleeping upon his little computer. And so all of a sudden we have the computer that is all of a sudden just typing away upon itself, asking Neo, would you like to play a game? Would you like to play a game? No. Click. I'm going to turn this off. So Neo all of a sudden wakes up to his computer, just sending him a message, telling him that the Matrix has gotten him, and to follow the white rabbit, or the right rabbit, whichever. Because what if all of a sudden there's some bunny that showed up at Neo's door coincidentally, and it was white, and he like follows it like, oh, I gotta follow this white rabbit, and like it's not the right white rabbit. That'd been funny. Anyways, so Keanu is to wake up by because of this dealer who is to have wanted something from him, and I don't actually know who the dealer actually is. Isn't that wonderful? Maybe his name is Cho? I don't know. It's too late to go on and ask questions. Anyways, so there's to be a guy who's to try to trade some kind of floppy disks, as if this is like the 19 some odd Smothers. So Neo is to have mentioned, like, hey man, do you ever feel like you're sleeping even when you're awake? And the guy's like, yeah, it's mescaline. It's a great drug. So this guy's to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, how about you and us like go out? Like, how about it? And he kind of like goes to his girl, like, do you think that he should go out? She's like, yeah. So all of a sudden we see this girl's shoulder, like shoulder from behind, and of course we end up seeing a tattoo of the White Rabbit. It's like, ha! Like, that's what the White Rabbit was to be mentioning. And why is it that this girl has a tattoo of the White Rabbit? Is it all of a sudden after this movie came out, was there just a billion girls who all of a sudden all got tattoos of white rabbits on their back just to mention the Matrix? Or hopefully there was some other reason besides you just being a fan of the Matrix. No? That's sad. Anyways, I have 4 white rabbits upon my back in reference to the Matrix. I have white rabbits on both sides of my shoulders in commemoration of the Matrix. So, pushing on, so Neo goes out because supposedly someone on his computer told him to. So, Neo goes to this party in this club where you should probably not obviously be able to hear anybody talk in this club because Rob Zombie's going on, bam, through the back. You shouldn't have been hearing what's going on. You should have been like, what? What, Trinity? What are you telling me? What? I'm the one. I don't buy that whatsoever. I think you're drugged in the head, buddy. What Jello shots have you been taking today? So, Neo just starts going through this club and he's like, whoa, I hope I meet somebody. Whoa. So Neo goes through this club and it is all of a sudden to bump into Trinity. What a coincidence, right? So Trinity, in a non-loud voice, which makes no sense to me, in this giant club with loud banging, head banging music, Trinity is talking to Neo and mentioning like who she is, because eventually Neo is to know who Trinity is. Like, oh, like, hey, like you're like a real la-di-da like hacker or whichever. And so Trinity's like, oh yeah, that's great. So whatever. Anyways, so Trinity is to tell Neo, it's like, I know that you've been looking for him. I know that you've been searching for Morbius. Like, I know you want to figure out what the Matrix is, and I want to help you. And like, because you need a question answered of what the Matrix is. So it seems like Neo and Trinity are just going to be like going on, and like she's going to go and like take him to Morbius, and all this stuff is going to be done and over with. But no, like Trinity is just to be at this club for just some goofy tease to just kind of like show herself, but not really go further on into that. So Neo was to mention that he wasn't really interested in going off to this club because he had work to do in the morning. And but he went to this club anyways. And so he ends up, of course, waking up late for work. So he goes off to work, and his boss is like, blah 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 blah. I like, you have to be here on time, Mr. Anderson. You. So Keanu Reeves goes off to his cubicle to do whatever the heck that he's doing in work. What the heck does he even do? He hasn't even been at work long enough to see what the heck he actually does at work. Is he gonna get a TPS report? Like, is it gonna be the Office Space all over again, where we're all of a sudden gonna take a copy machine and beat the crap out of it with a baseball bat? That's what it seems like it looks like here. Maybe this is gonna be the Office all of a sudden, where all of a sudden we're gonna have Steve Carell is like, no, God, no, no. I don't know. They never show what actually Neo does at his job. So the only thing that Neo had to have actually done to his with his job is to get a FedEx thing through the mail, which is just to be this phone, this flip phone, where you just hit this button and the thing comes down. Man, just the old days. Just flip phones. We could be like, hello. Man, I think still some people still have flip phones. Like, I know for me, like, when I was to originally get a phone, I wanted to get like a flip phone. I thought flip phones were cool. And then all of a sudden you end up finding out, like, yeah, like, if you really want to actually have a more updated thing, you have to get this thing. And I'm like, this thing? This? Whatever this is? Now I have to hit buttons and things on a screen? I don't know about that. But now, like, several years later, it's like, okay, I guess that's just our thing now. That's what we have to forcibly do. There's not a flip phone system anymore. And you know what? That, I think, is the one problem. That, you know how many people are going to be freaking breaking their screens and whatever from their phones because that's the future now? Man, like, there's something about a flip phone where at least it was a very durable thing, but still maybe not a cool looking thing. So, anyways, pushing on. So Keanu is to be getting a phone call. Hello, Miss Neo, it's me. It's Morbius. I'm going to tell you to go into these certain parts of your office. But before that, I'm going to let you also know that there's some agents looking over and trying to find you. So you should probably go into the next cubicle next to you, and then go down this hallway into the office in the corner, and then go into this one window and open it, and have to go through the scaffolding to the rooftop to be able to get the heck out of here. And hopefully you don't go ahead and get scared because you might have a fear of heights, and you might just be like, dude, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna lose this phone. It's gonna go flying out of my hand, and I'm just gonna die, right? Here's my thing. Why didn't Keanu put that phone into any number of pockets that he was to have so he wouldn't lose said phone? Because why was he consistently holding on to it while going through a rooftop? You ever see Batman on rooftop just holding on to his phone? Hey, wait a minute, Alfred. I gotta go and I got a Gatling gun from this rooftop to the next rooftop. Like, I'll give you a heads up when that's done, okay? Like, tell me what fishy swat is, because I still don't know what that is. It's supposed to be called you, Alfred. You. Click! So, Keanu is to almost get, like, a portion of the scaffolding thing, but then he ends up deciding to chicken out. Go and to get arrested by these agents, and so coincidentally Trinity is to be in a motorcycle in front of these agents' car, which you would have thought, like, these agent people, while arresting Neo, would have just been like, hey, is that also Trinity? I don't know, let's go and check that out. Pow pow. Was anybody else thinking that? No? Good. So Neo is to make it to the interrogation room where he is to have this big fat file of, well, this is Mr. Anderson, a file that seems that you've never even had a parking ticket in your life. But then here is also the other file of this character called Neo, who has broken every hacking law in that we have ever made. So, are you going to work with us, or are you going to work against us? Is there going to be some file that we're going to have to chuck here, or is there going to be some file that we're going to have to make be called Neo Goes to Prison Forever? And so, Neo is just like, well, you know what? This bargain sounds pretty good. But you know what I can also bargain to do? Here's my finger. And let me give me some of that phone call. Can you give me a phone call? Can you give me one of those? Like, I know my rights. Give me my phone call. And so, we have Agent Smith who's like, well, how can you have a phone call if you can't speak? And then Neo is just like, well, I'm speaking now, so f you. No, all of a sudden Neo's mouth just starts to just dissolve away. And now we have some, like, Hellraiser moment going on here. So, weirdly, Neo is to be, like grabbed by these agents, tossed onto this bed, or tossed on this table, bed? What are we now, like, Matrix style in it? Neo is to be tossed on this table and is to be put a bug inside of his belly button. They call it a bug. I actually had to look that up to see what the actual term of that was, and it was actually called a bug. You couldn't have come up with an extreme, like, this is Nosferatu, the bug of the bug of the 500ths. It's not an overly complicated name, it's just bug. Okay, great. So, Keanu Reeves gets a bug in his belly button, and so he ends up going off to waking up at home. So, I'm just like, wait a minute, what was the whole, like, he's gonna go in jail and, like, be, like, made everyone his puppet for the rest of their lives? Like, where was that? Where was all of a sudden Keanu going to be, like, made a puppet of for the rest of his life going into jail? Like, how is that not the goofiest thing that you've ever seen in your life? But anyways, so, because Mr. Smith says, well, you're going to help us whether you like it or not. So, Neo is to eventually go on and to get picked up by Trinity and to have them drive away with him. And so we have both Twitch and APOC. APOC is driving, Twitch is holding a gun on Neo, And so they're basically telling them, like, hey, it's our way or the highway, because, like, if you're not going to take the red pill or the blue pill, you're basically forced into whatever we're doing anyways. So, Neo opens the door of the car to almost get out of there, and Trinity's like, hey, I've been down that road before. Like, I know that there's actually a Chinese food place right in the corner of that road. So if you're going to go down there, make sure you go down to that Chinese spot. Really good noodles. No, Trinity is to mention that she's been down that road before, and that's not a road that Neo really wants to go into. Neo wants to stay here with them. And so Neo gets back into, of course, the car and is like, okay, what do you want me to do next? So now they have to go, and now they have to go with the machine into Keanu Reeves' belly button to retrieve this bug. And so, like, Trinity is, like, having this machine where she's, like, and she's trying to get the bug, and Switch is just like, you're not gonna get it. It's not gonna happen. So Trinity eventually gets the bug and drops it out of the door, and we have Neo is like, oh my god, that was real? Yeah, it was real. It was for real. So now Neo goes off. I'm gonna have to pause here for a second. Neo goes off to meet Morpheus. Not any relation to Morbius. It's not one and the same. The Marvel movie with Jared Leto. Anyways, Keanu goes off to meet Morpheus, and so that's, of course, when we get to the scenario of, would you like the red pill, or would you like the blue pill, or would you like the white pill? The white pill is to stop you from farting. So, of course, we have Keanu meeting Morpheus for the first time. Like, oh my god, this is the first time I've ever actually seen this guy. And so Morpheus is to proposition Keanu or Neo's character because really, like, Neo is to quite possibly be the one, and Neo is to also to be much more wanting to know things more so than anyone else is, and that's what's making him to be a standing out character. So, red pill, blue pill, of course, Neo is to take the blue pill, and then we have him to be hooked up onto this electric chair-like machine. Where is it that they have all of this stuff? Like, in the unreal world, supposedly. How is it that they concoct all these machines and have them just sitting around wherever, willy-nilly? How is it that the Matrix hasn't corrected this bizarrish behavior of all these weapons or all these things that seemingly exist and seemingly wherever? So, Neo is to touch this mirror because the mirror is looking goofy at him, and so all of a sudden, like, Neo's hand is to turn into this silver thing, and he's like, oh, it's cold, it's cold. And so, like, all of a sudden, like, Neo's whole body is seemingly turning to silver, and Trinity is to say that that his, like, heart is really going almost in cardiac arrest. And so they're like, hey man, flip the switch, hurry up, get him on. So all of a sudden Anderson or Neo is to transition into seemingly this pink tub of sorts that is to be hooked up, and he's to be, like, hooked up and, like, have all these like tubes and all this stuff around his bate, and, like, he's to, like, ugh, like, that is such a gross image of him having to, like, out of his, like, mouth, that whole thing, and I'm just like, good god. So Neo kind of rips himself out of this tube and is to eventually have this machine who is to pop all of these tubes or pop all these wires from out of him, and then like, flush him down this Matrix toilet to go into this part of water where he's just kind of floating around. And So the Nebuchadnezzar or the Morpheus ship goes and picks him up, and so now they have to go through, and now they have to go on and like bring him back to life because this guy was just like sunk into this thing, and he's never used one part of his muscles ever in his life, and he's never used his eyes in his life ever. So Keanu is just on this slab being poked and prodded and to be like acupunctured back to where he can use any portion of his body because he has never used any of it ever. So wouldn't that be interesting if you had a life where you're this like hugely muscular person that you can lift unlimited amounts of weight, and then all of a sudden you go from out of the matrix, and then all of a sudden you're just this like skinny slab of a person where you're just like I did all that work just to be like skin and bones, wouldn't that be a pain in the butt? Or hey, if you were just this like also on the opposite scale of things, like you could be the big like belly whatever, and then all of a sudden you like step out of the matrix and you're like this skinny person. Like, how did I, how did I not look the exact same? Whatever. So it's kind of interesting when we are kind of told that everything is really just a lie. That like eventually Cypher will go back to the Matrix and go and eat this steak, and he'll just be like, you know what? I know that this isn't real. I know that this steak is just to like say that my brain is going to tell me that it's juicy, succulent, and delicious, but ignorance is bliss. Because eventually, when they go to the real world, all they eat is like this cream of wheat or oatmeal looking thing, which they don't even know if that's really cream of wheat or oatmeal because like maybe they never really got cream of wheat or oatmeal right. And so like maybe it's actually just chicken because everything tastes like chicken. So so when Neo is to be fine and to be able to walk about, he is to be introduced by everybody. Some people he already knew, like Trinity, and eventually some people that he eventually will need to know the name of, like Mouse, or APOC, or Tank, or Switch, or Cypher, or Dozer, any number of people. Morbius, again, because maybe he just completely forgot already what his name was. Because he was in this slab of a bed for a while, who knows. So, Neo goes on and gets his cream of wheat, or seemingly a thing that is to be a cream of wheat, and supposedly it's supposed to be vitamins and minerals, everything that the body is supposed to need. And I think that this is a spot that happens way later because eventually we have the part where we have to have Mouse talk about the program, which we haven't done yet, so we'll get to that. So Neo is to be up and at him, so Tank is to come in him. Come in him? No, that seemed awful. Tank is to come for him. Good God, was that a just? Anyways, so Tank is to come for Neo and is to download some information into his noggin to basically show him what is to be called kung fu, jujitsu, and any number of things. Uh, so Neo is to go and download every single bit of information into his bate, and so like they've been doing this for like 10 hours straight, and so Morpheus to come to Tank and ask like, hey, how's the progress? Tank is like, well, he's been doing this for 10 hours, he's a machine. So Neo is to come back, and so Neo is to mention to Morpheus that he knows kung fu, and Morpheus is like, okay, well, show me. Now we get the showdown between Morpheus and Neo, which everyone in the ship is really excited about. Everyone's all of a sudden, hey, Morpheus is fighting Neo! Yeah, let's see this! So, we go in here, and so now there's to be this transition of us being in this seemingly dojo of sorts, and so uh, Morpheus is to tell Neo that this is a training program that might seem like the Matrix, but it's just a training program. So Neo is to go ahead and have to fight Morpheus because Morpheus wants Neo to try and hit him. So Neo starts to go on and starts using different kind of fighting styles, maybe like the crane and all number of things. So, or the bear, or the drunken monkey. I don't know. So, I don't know fighting styles. Whatever. It's goofy. Anyway, it's Power Rangers. You could put the Power Rangers music in this, and it would feel the same thing. So, Neo is going and fighting Morpheus, and he's like, well, if anything, like good improvisation and whatever, but you have one flaw, and so Neo keeps going and fighting against Morpheus and continue. Like it seems at first that they were kind of goofing around, but then eventually get serious, and all of a sudden, while everyone else is watching them fight, Mouse is to mention like, God, he's so fast, like we've never seen like a person move that quickly. So eventually it does get to the point where like Morpheus is like, stop trying to hit me and hit me. So eventually Neo gets so quick and so fast, and but eventually gets knocked on his butt, and so Morpheus is like, well, why have you kind of why? I'm paraphrasing a lot. Morpheus is like, well, why did you fail? And Neo is like, well, you're faster than me, you're stronger than me, and really, this whole part of this whole fight is to free Neo's mind. Is really what is to happen. That anybody could probably beat anyone. It just means that your mind has to be freer than someone else's. So Morpheus is just be like, well, like in this world, like how is it that I can be stronger or faster than you? Like, do you really think that that's air you're breathing now? Like, this is just like a way to try to free up this guy's mind to just be like, how is it that I can beat you? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you should be able to take me down easily, but you're not. Like, you're overthinking things. Anyway. So we get where we re-upload the program, and so eventually Neo tries at it for this other time, and this time around Neo actually accomplishes his goal. He actually goes and seemingly punches Morpheus, and kind of Morpheus is kind of taken back. So now that Morpheus has gone on to finally have Neo finally do what he is to want to do, now Morpheus uploads the jump program. Supposedly, no one the first time around has ever made the jump the first time around. So we're assuming that Neo isn't going to make this jump either. So Morpheus is a showcase that, again, this is a training program. Morpheus jumps and from rooftop to rooftop to tell Neo, it's like, hey, I'm trying to free your mind. Frickin' like, this is just hopping from one building to the other. It should be a cinch. So Neo goes off. He ends up jumping because he's like, whoa. And so he ends up jumping, and he runs for it. He jumps, and then all of a sudden he's going, ah! And he ends up falling. They get out of there, and so eventually Neo's to find that he has like blood in his mouth, and he's like, how is it that I have blood in my mouth? And Morpheus is like, well, your brain makes it real. So if you're to die in the Matrix, you're to die for real. It's stay alive all over again. If you die in the game, you die for real. So Morpheus is to also set up another program for Neo to showcase that eventually, like, all the people that are in the Matrix are all people that they are trying to save. And that eventually, like, you really probably should not get distracted by looking at a girl in a red dress, because all of a sudden you will see an agent when you are not to be paying attention. Like, always go and look at your exits, always go and look all around you, or otherwise you are going to die. So, this is a training program to just showcase what a real, true, legitimate threat an agent can be. That eventually, if you are to be face to face with one, you should run away. That uh, a lot of guys that are on Morpheus's side has emptied numerous clips into these agents, have done any number of things to try to take them down, and it had been a waste of time. So, if anything, like, just try to always remember to try to get away from these people. Fighting won't always mean that you are going to make it out. More than likely, you're probably going to die fighting one of these agents. So that's when we get the cream of wheat thing. That's when Mouse is to mention about his girl in the red dress, and to mention that quite possibly that there is a setup that he can have a private get together with the girl in the red dress and Neo. So pushing on. So Morpheus is to come in and tell everybody, like, hey, we're going to take Neo to see the Oracle, and there is to also be a spot in between here where, or before here, where Neo is to be sharing a thing of alcohol with Cypher, where Cypher is to also tell Neo, like, if you see an agent, run. I know you're probably regretting, why didn't you take the red pill? So Neo is trying to understand the code of the Matrix, and Cypher doesn't even understand the code. Every once in a while, he sees redhead, blonde, something like that, brunette. Like, he can kind of see some kind of things in the code, but he can't figure it all out. So right after that is when we have Cypher, who is going off to see Mr. Anderson, who is to bargain with him to say that, hey, like, I'll give you Morpheus if you give me a life where I'm to be rich and famous and I know nothing of what happened before. I'm like, how is he going to know that he's going to be this rich and famous and important guy after this whole thing is over, when they could honestly have just killed him off after this whole thing is to be done? That's the stupid thing, is, like, you get a person that's to, like, bargain, but, like, I don't think he even really knows what he's bargaining. So, pushing on. So, Morpheus is wanting to take Neo to the Oracle. And this moment kind of feels like the moment from Captain America, where Captain America and Agent Carter are in the car and they're, like, going off, I think, to eventually have Captain America get experimented on, or talking about dancing or whichever. There's a lot of car moments in that movie, but like, it seems like whatever moments that Agent Carter and Steve Rogers were together in that car moment, where he's to mention, like, how he got, like, beat up in that alley, and that one, and that one. So it kind of feels like that. So we're driving off to the Oracle. Neo is to mention that that was a place where he used to go and eat a lot of noodles. He loves noodles. So we drive to the Oracle and make it to this place. So Morpheus is just to sit off to the side to let Neo just go on to make it to the Oracle. Neo goes and sees all these kids who are to be, like, potentials or prodigies or whichever, genius people that can do goofy things. So we start to see these kids who seemingly have this, like, Scarlet Witch kind of ability with them, where we see people who can all of a sudden move these building blocks, or we see this one kid who can bend this spoon, And so Neo sits next to this one kid who can bend this spoon. And so Neo grabs a spoon, and the kid mentions, it's like, well, don't imagine that you can bend the spoon. That's impossible. But imagine instead there is no spoon. So Neo just goes, nah, just bends the spoon. And all of a sudden, the person's like, well, we'll see you now. And so, like, the spoon is perfectly fine. So Neo goes off to see the Oracle, and the Oracle is baking cookies. She's like, "Oh, go ahead and like, I know you won't sit down. Even when I say go ahead and sit down, you won't. And don't worry about the vase." And Neo's like, "Vase?" And he smacks into a vase and drops it. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And Oracle is like, "Well, hey, like, here's the thing. What if I wouldn't have told you about the vase? Would you have knocked it over? Like, that's gonna burn your noodle later, your brain." And so I'm like, yeah, what if he wouldn't have been told about the vase? Probably still would have knocked it over because it was probably a bound to happen thing. Here's my thing. If Oracle would have known that that vase would have been broken, shouldn't she have moved the vase before that whole moment happened? Was she just knowing that that guy was going to break the vase, so she planned on having him break the vase, so that way she herself could confuse him and put this whole scene together like that? That's what I'm assessing. Freaking Oracle wanting to just break vases because she can. So Neo just sits down anyways, and so the Oracle is like, well, I guess I should look you up and down and just be like a doctor weirdly, and just be like opening up your eyes and like open your mouth, like look at your hands, and Oracle's like, and I'm supposed to say, and Neo's like, I'm not the one. And the Oracle should have said there, no, I'm just hungry. I'm hungry. Like, that's why I made the cookies. Aren't you stupid? Like, that's what I made the cookies for. Because I'm hungry. I'm like, I smell the scent of the aroma of the cookies. That's why I'm saying right now. That's why I'm saying So Neo is to find out that he's not the one. And the Oracle is just like, well, hey, like, don't worry about it. If anything, I'm sure you're just waging for something, like your another life or something, as if you're going to have one, because maybe there isn't. Maybe you're going to die and find out that there's some other real world and Matrix and whatever you were to be in wasn't even the real world. Isn't that going to burn your noggin? So, eventually, Oracle is telling Neo that eventually they're going to have to weigh out something. Like, he's going to have to weigh out something. And Neo's like, well, what exactly? And Oracle's like, well, do you really want to hear this? And Neo's like, of course. And so Oracle is to mention that supposedly he is going to have to weigh out either between Morpheus's life or Neo's own life himself. So eventually there's going to come a time for that. It's like, man, does this Oracle just know everything that eventually, like, this decision or this thing is going to happen regardless? That, like, everything is just bound to happen? Like, does she know the lucky lottery tickets so that we can get some of that? Can I get some of them lottery tickets, Oracle? So that we can get some winning stuff going on here? Can I? Anyways. So Neo goes and gets a cookie, and it's to just run along because he's to find out he's not the one. So Morpheus is to tell Neo, like, in his kind of, like, I know you're the one, but maybe you're not. But man, would that suck if you're not the not one, right? Know what I'm saying? So Morpheus says that this whole arrangement that was to be done was to be for his ears and his ears alone. And what if one person would have just popped up like, I heard that he's not the one, and then he would have walked off. Just like, that would have been funny. I know that he's not the one, suck it. So Morpheus and Neo are to go back to the location, their hideout, and to eventually get a phone call to get them the heck out of there. So Neo all of a sudden is to go up this flight of stairs to eventually see this cat, all of a sudden shakes and walks off. All of a sudden we end up seeing the exact same cat going and shaking and walking off. So in other words, they just reuse the same clip twice. And Keanu Reeves is like, deja vu. You guys ever had that? Because Neo is the only one that caught all this besides everyone else. So that makes him the one. Because evidently he saw all of that cat and no one else saw it because they suck at their jobs. And so Trinity is like, well, was that the exact same cat? Can you certify that it looked like the exact same cat? And so Neo was like, I think so. Morpheus is like, well, that means that they must have changed something. So all of a sudden they're starting to go through all the windows and find out that all the windows are boarded and with all these bricks. And so like, yeah, they had changed something. So all of a sudden Mouse is to go on and get a call from Tank saying that they had changed something, that something's going down. And so Mouse all of a sudden is trying to get out this window, which he can't. So all of a sudden he ends up getting these big fat guns out and flinging them out and try to kill all these police officers who are running into this spot. And so because Mouse, of course, being caught off guard and outnumbered, Mouse was to get killed. So now Morpheus is to have Tank go and look at the blueprints of this building to find some wet wall. So Morpheus goes crashing through this one building off camera, or goes crashing through this one wall, I guess off camera. So we have all the Matrix people just going in between these walls, trying to sneak out. And so all the police try to go and try to find where these people are, to eventually find that they can't find them. Morpheus all of a sudden is to just kind of like scuffle a little bit because everybody's trying to slide down this little place as quietly as possible. Excuse me. As quietly as possible. Cypher all of a sudden is getting a little dust into his face, and so he ends up coughing and sneezing. And so all of a sudden one police officer is like, they're in the walls! So he starts like shooting all over the walls. And so Neo ends up firing back. And so Morpheus is like, is telling Trinity, he's just like, get Neo out, it's all that matters. So Morpheus goes flying through the wall to go and fight this agent, because one of the agents had tried to grab Neo and is trying to like pull him out. So Morpheus goes flying through the wall to fight this agent, and so like we have everybody who's all like sliding down through these walls, and so Trinity is now trying to grab Neo to get him out of there, because Neo won't go because he wants to make sure that Morpheus gets out also. But Trinity's like, well, this is the only mission that I'm having, getting you out of here, because supposedly you might be the one. So you're the most important thing. And plus also, like, Morbius is technically Trinity's commanding officer, so doing the orders of which that she was given. So they slide down, try to get the heck out of there. So Cypher has supposedly gone onto his own separate thing of himself, while also in the early part of this scene, he ends up chucking his phone into a trash can. So Cypher is to call up Tank to just be like, hey man, I was almost in a car wreck, like somebody out there likes me. So Cypher runs off to eventually find where the next phone is, and then eventually everyone else is to eventually scramble off to eventually go where Cypher is. So eventually Morpheus is to go and try to fight um, Agent Smith, and so he's doing a pretty good job. He's like, a lot, which that's Morpheus's fighting style. To So eventually, Morpheus gets outnumbered, gets billy clubbed by a lot of police officers, and then he ends up having to, of course, be taken by the agents to eventually have his mind being hacked into using drugs to try to get the information that they are to seek, which is the codes of all of these ships to be able to uh, get to figure out where the resistance is and to be able to wipe them all out. So Morpheus is getting a little drugged. He's getting a little just like getting a little eye rolling action going on. So now we have to cover what's going on with both Neo and Trinity. So Neo and Trinity are to find the place where Cypher had gone because Cypher had gotten to the phone. Cypher had been unplugged, and then Cypher decided to go off and try and kill both Tank and actually kill Dozer. So now Cypher has Tank's headset, and so Trinity is trying to pick up the phone, and she ends up finding out that it's Cypher. And Cypher is to mention that the real world is actually a lie, and that Cypher is to admit that he was the one to have turned Morpheus in, and that Cypher was to mention that he wants to be there when they are to break him, just to have Cypher know that it was, or to have Morbius know that Cypher was to have been the one to call this all along, to call this part to have Morpheus be shuffled off. So, so now Cypher starts pulling the plug of some of these characters to have us be foreshadowed to know that if you are to pull the plug on these people, that is to equal death, while they're still to be hooked into the Matrix, to help us understand this whole thing. So, so Cypher is to start to pull the plug of some of his supposed friends, and so he ends up pulling the plug of APOC, and so APOC is to die. And so Trinity is to tell, like, hey, if you have anything important to say to Switch right now, it would be pretty good to just just let her know. And then so Switch is like, I don't want to die, not like this. All of a sudden, she falls over, sadly enough. So now we have to get to the spot where Cypher is going to pull the plug on Neo. And so Cypher is like, you know what, if Neo is really and truly the one, there has to be some miraculous thing that all of a sudden is not going to lead to Neo's death right now. And so Cypher is to want to know from Trinity if Trinity does really actually love Neo. And that Trinity, or Cypher wants Trinity to look in those big blue eyes of his and is to say whether or not that she loves him. And Trinity is to say yes, and Cypher is like, I don't believe it. And so all of a sudden, Tank is to come out and be like, and she'd be like, you're still gonna burn. And so he ends up freaking killing off Cypher. And then he ends up going and getting the headset to where he can go and unhook both Trinity and Neo. And then, like, Tank was also to spit at freaking Cypher, like, Pih! You're still gonna burn. So Trinity is to get an update, but like, hey, you look hurt. Tank's fine, but Dozer is dead, sadly enough. So now their game plan is to eventually just be like, yeah. Oh, I also missed the spot where eventually once they were to be like unhooked, how eventually they were going to have to like hide away from the Sentinels and then try to, as much as possible, be quiet for the Sentinels to kind of like scoot after, or to not go after the Nebuchadnezzar. But I just like, I don't think that part is really important. It's to set up the EMP, which eventually they again will do that later on in the movie. I could have gone back to that scene at the end of this movie when they're talking about the EMP again, but I just really didn't like this scene right here with the whole Sentinels and them going through the sewers and trying to avoid the Sentinels. Yeah, it doesn't really matter to me. It's not a big scene. I don't really care for it. It doesn't really. It just shows the MP and the Sentinels, and like it's just to foreshadow what happens towards the end of the movie. So I don't really care about that scene. So and plus, that's to have all been done when basically everyone is still alive upon the ship. So pushing on. So eventually, what Tank's idea is next to do is Morpheus is eventually going to break. While Morpheus is in the spot of which where there's seemingly a whole entire skyscraper of agents, a whole entire skyscraper of police officers and whatever. And it seems like an impossible task to have anybody go and try to rescue Morpheus. So it's probably about time to just pull the plug on Morpheus and kill him off, so that way everyone could be saved. So, Morpheus is eventually just going and getting his eyes being rolled in the back of his head, trying to be like, I'm trying to break. I'm trying to break for these agents. So we have this spot where Agent Smith is getting up an update on all the other agents to see where Morpheus is at. And so, like, the agents are just like, well, maybe we're asking him the wrong questions. Agent Smith is just like, well, hey, how about I just go and have a word with him? So here's probably the most like coolest spot in this movie where we just have Agent Smith who is just like touching freaking Morbius's face and just like and like putting the stench or the sweat of just in his nose and all this stuff. And so we have Agent Smith who's just like, you know what, I don't like this place. It's the smell. Like every time I'm around you, I feel like I'm somehow infected by it, and all of this and all of that. And so, like, Agent Smith is like, I need those codes, and uh, so now I'm gonna reset here for a second. Anyways, it's been a while. It's been an hour. So, pushing on. So Neo is just be like, well, you know what, Trinity, I'm not really the one, so I'm going to go and save Morpheus because that's what I believe. That I can save him, that I can bring him back. That we don't have to pull the plug, that's a mistake. It's time for us to go and save him. And Trinity is, well, like, I'm going to go with you too. Like, freaking, I'm going to go and get a lot of guns and, and go and try to save Morpheus. Because, you know what, like, I believe he means more to me than he does to you. So, like, I'm going to go and save this man. So Tank is just saying that this is loco, that this is never going to work. And Neo is just like, well, that's my whole thing, that I believe it's going to work. So Neo goes off and is to get a boatload of guns, and so then he goes off to go into this building, where of course we get the coolest scene in moviedom ever. The whole spot where both Neo and Trinity are going into this building and going through this metal detector and like, do you have any metal, sir? And all of a sudden he just whips out his freaking trench coat. There's like a billion guns, and he's like, oh my god! And so like Neo just starts whipping out these guns and start firing upon everybody. God, there's some cool moments where we're just seeing like people cartwheeling and flipping and all these like real cool action sequences. We have Neo who ends up going up against this one God, what is it called? Like this one like slab of a building or whatever, where he's just kind of holding there while these like uh, Asian people are all firing around him, and he's just kind of holding off, just like, okay, I'll go now, and then he ends up like through all these people. Like this whole sequence is probably the best part of the movie. The whole like slow motion, pew 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 of these bullets, and you have like Trinity, and you have uh freaking Neo just going and like grabbing people's weapons and like flinging them and just shooting people. Freaking the greatest action sequence you've ever seen in your life. So so after they go and they take down every bit of these people, they end up going into this elevator where they end up just taking the the elevator rope and just putting a bomb inside the elevator. And so Neo is to be reminded that there is no spoon. And so he ends up shooting off, and they end up going right to the top of this whole elevator thing. So, and then the elevator crashes down and has this huge explosion. So they go all the way to the rooftop, and of course, now we have to get to the other cool action sequence, because there is to be an agent that ends up to form off onto this rooftop, because we have an agent who ends up taking the guy who is to be able to do the helicopter and changes him to an agent. So now we have both Trinity and Neo kind of fighting off all these people and then trying to get to the helicopter. But now Neo has to fight off this agent, and so Neo is to go and shoot at this agent, where this agent is kind of like dodging, like kind of weirdly doing all these weird dodges quickly. And so Neo is running out of bullets, so he's like, Trinity, help! And so that's when we have to do the maneuver where he has to like kind of fly back. And so all of a sudden we have the agent who is to mention, it's like, well, oh God, what is his line? God, what does he just say? I don't remember what he says, but I know Trinity ends up saying, it's like, dodge this, and he ends up like, shh. Trinity ends up shooting the agent right in the head and kills him. So Trinity is to mention Neo that, like, how do you move like that? You move like they do. And Neo's like, I don't know, like, beats me. But Neo is just transitioning on. He's like, well, because he like says it's like not, he didn't move fast enough because he ended up getting shot twice. So now Neo is to mention to Trinity, like, hey, have you ever flown one of those things? Trinity's like, no, but I will. Tank downloads a thing for Trinity to be able to fly this helicopter. So now we have the cool action sequence again, where now Neo and Morpheus are now just kind of helicoptering their way to where Morpheus is. And so the agents are having to make Agent Smith aware of what's going on, that they're trying to rescue Morpheus. So all of a sudden we have this helicopter that arrives and is just like freaking just spraying all over the gosh darn place. And so these agents end up getting shot, and so now these agents have to appear in another hallway. So Neo is to tell Morpheus, like, get up, Morpheus, you can do it. And all of a sudden, coincidentally at this time, Morpheus is just like, yeah, like, I'm just going to bizarrely break my handcuffs and be able to just unhook myself from all this stuff and now just be able to start chugging along. And so the agents get outside and shoot Morpheus in the ankle, and so Neo is just like, Morpheus isn't going to make it. And so Neo jumps to try to smack into Morpheus, which just has Morpheus slide and grab onto Neo's hand. And so now Trinity is now just flinging these guys around through town, just like, You know what? This doesn't seem like a perfect enough drop. Hey, this doesn't seem like a perfect enough place. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem quite right. Like, she's taken like a million years to drop these people off. So Neo just drops Morpheus onto this building, and he ends up like flinging onto the building, and he ends up like watching what's going on. He's like, huh? Like, what's gonna happen next? So Neo all of a sudden is to go on and start to fall to onto this building because the helicopter had gotten some shots within it. So eventually, this helicopter is just going to crash somewhere. So Neo is to fall, but then he's to realize, oh, Trinity, and then so he goes and takes the rope, and then he like holds on to it because he's like, I think she's gonna grab onto this rope. Hopefully, she does. Or otherwise, I'm just gonna get dragged down and freaking be killed. So Neo goes and starts doing a slide bit to eventually like stop right under this building. And so now we just see Trinity, who's getting out of this helicopter, shooting this rope and then just holding onto it, smacking into the glass of this building while this helicopter is just to get annihilated. So that's when Tank is like, he's the one. Ha! And so Neo goes and gets Trinity from this rope. I hope he dropped her. Like, whoa! Oh, my bad. No. So Neo gets Trinity, and all of a sudden, Neo is just like, well, like, I didn't think I was the one. And, like, Morpheus is like, hold on a minute. It's like, there's a whole difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And, like, obviously you are the one. Let's just put that in the book now, that there's two scenarios where you already knew something was going to happen, so you're the one now. Just believe it. So, so now we go on to having these guys run off to make it to this subway station where they're eventually going to get this, of course, phone call in this phone booth. So Morpheus goes first, and he ends up leaving, and then Trinity is to be second. So Morpheus and Trinity make it out, and right at that time when Trinity is to make it out, Smith shoots up the phone. So yeah, that's dead. So now Neo, instead of having to just go like, well, I guess I'm effed. I'm going to get the F out of here. See you guys later. I'm going to be running off. No, he decides that instead he's going to go ahead and fight Agent Smith. And because he looks at the stairs, but he's like, no. Like, I'm going to fight Agent Smith. So we have this cool action sequence between Agent Smith and Neo. And we have the spot where he's just be like, and I'm like, yeah! Everybody who have probably ever seen this film is always going to be just like, yeah, mother. Someone's going to throw down. And we have them consistently being like tossed through freaking walls and like breaking all this stuff. We're like, yeah! They're like trying to shoot at one another and they end up going out of bullets. And like we have the one spot where Agent Smith is trying to like brutally punch Neo in the ribs, and like Neo is starting to spit blood, and Trinity's like, he's killing him. And so eventually we have the spot where Agent Smith is tossing Neo into the subway, and Agent Smith is like, you hear that, Mr. Anderson? It's the sound of your death. And so all of a sudden Neo is to go and like jump up, smack Agent Smith away from him before he tells him like, my name is Neo. Frickin' subway hit, and then all of a sudden we have Neo who ends up flipping. Coincidentally, I think in some spots you can see the wires of where like Neo was flipping in some scenes. Like they might have remastered it to where you can't tell, but like I've seen certain cuts of the Matrix where you can kind of see the wires of where he's flipping from. at the tail end of the scene. So we just see like Neo, who's kind of like trying to dangle between the subway, where it's like flying at him. So Neo now decides that he's going to run for the stairs, and all of a sudden we have the train stop, and Agent Smith comes out of the subway, and now Neo decides, oh, I'm going to run now. I'm going to do some running. So Neo grows. Neo makes my monster grow. Now, Neo runs off to go and find some random person's phone, and like, hey, Mr. Wizard, I need to get the heck out of here. So Tank goes and is to try to like tell Neo where to go. While this is going on, we have Morpheus, Trinity, and Tank, who's eventually going to get some company in the form of Sentinels or the Squibbies, whatever they mentioned that their name is. So, Morpheus is to tell Tank to kind of prep the MP, but Neo will get out. So, Neo is running for his life. Eventually, agents keep popping out of nowhere, trying to fire bullets at Neo. So, Neo is going up these ladders, up to this building, all the way up to this spot. And so, eventually, he's going through this hallway to 303. And so, Tank is like, oh, go to your right. No, your other right. So, once Neo is to make it to this room, all of a sudden, he is to find Agent Smith, right in front of him. And so now Agent Smith is to litter up Neo's bate with bullets. Just plah, 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 and Neo's just like, So Neo goes and falls on the ground. He's like, I'm dead. Whoa. I'm dead. Whoa. So we're like the very first time I ever saw this, I'm like, he dies? We did all of this? Neo's dead? We had to go through this whole story of him being the one just to kill him off. This doesn't make any sense. I want my money back. And so all of a sudden we have Trinity, who is to see like Neo flatlining. And so Trinity is talking to Neo, and Trinity's like, well, the Oracle had told me that I was going to fall in love with a dead man, so smooches. And so you can't be dead because, like, you need to keep going. Like, you need to get out of here, and you need to be at the end of this movie to be our hero for the other films that we're going to do here, because motherfucking franchises. So Trinity is like, you have to be alive, you have to get up. And so all of a sudden, Neo's heart is to start beating. He's to get up. And now here's where we find out that he's really and truly the one. That even bullets have no effect upon Neo. So Neo gets up and he's like, yeah. Plop, plop, plop. How many bullets? 6? Plop, plop, plop. How many more bullets you want to try to fling at me? Because we had that whole spot with the whole girl in the red dress where Neo was to say it's like, so I'm going to be dodging bullets. And so Morpheus was to say it's like, well, when you're ready, you won't have to be. So Neo all of a sudden is in this hallway. All the agents are going and shooting bullets at Neo. And so Neo is just going like, no. And he stops all of them like a badass. And so he picks up one of the bullets. He's like, meh. Cherry. No, he drops all the bullets. And so all of a sudden the agent comes like flying at him. And so he's just like with like one hand. And he's like, I must be the one now. Oh, this is weird. And so Neo eventually goes inside of this agent. And then all of a sudden this agent ends up like bubbling up. And then freaking explodes, which causes the other agents just like, whoa, I'm getting the F out of here. So Neo goes, makes the call because the Sentinels are ripping through the ship. And so, like, Trinity's like, Neo! And so Neo runs to make the call. He gets up, and then they pull the EMP. And so both Neo and Trinity are kissing. And so that is to basically wrap up this movie. Just like, yeah, they did everything that they're set out to do. And so now Neo is to call whoever, I'm assuming the villains of this story, and to tell them it's like, well, like I'm going to change everything. I'm going to make the impossible seem possible because people need to know that this world is not real and all this stuff. I don't even remember what all he says at the end of here. Um, but yeah, so like we get him to come out of the phone booth, and all of a sudden the music is like, and then all of a sudden we just see Neo just flying off. We're like, what the is this? He's flying off. What? And then in sequels, we just see him doing Superman stuff and all that kind of goofy things. And we're just seeing him flying everywhere. And I'm just like, this is so wild. This is so wacky. But, anyways, yeah, that's all I wanted to say about this movie. I'm going to get out of here. This took a while, so I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.